Across Canada and around the world, Indigenous youth are driving change and innovating for a just and prosperous future. Young People Know is a podcast series featuring conversations with Indigenous young people about what organizations can do to get youth engagement right. Brought to you by the MasterCard Foundation and Indigenous 150 Plus. Find Young People Know on all podcast players or by visiting indigenouspodcast.ca.
More than 100 people died while living on the streets of Winnipeg this year, mostly due to poisoned drugs. But the city's tight-knit homeless community won't let them be forgotten. I'm Kathleen Martins, and this is Our Relatives. A warning, this episode deals with disturbing subject matter.
Marla Stevens, Carmen Peachy, Dave Brown.
The sun is rising over Main Street, and the scent of smudge lingers in the air, as the homeless people who died in 2023 are remembered here in Hope Alley.
I've been doing this for 5 years. The yearly memorial to remember all our relatives who've passed.
The narrow concrete laneway off Main Street isn't much to look at. Most people wouldn't even know it was here. There are a few wooden benches and some flower boxes. It's where Jacob Kaufman fights back tears as he reads out the names of 36 people known to have died this year.
And to everyone else that we missed, and everyone else who is laying in landfills across North America.
And you said this year has been particularly tough.
Yes.
Can you explain why?
I grew up on the streets across North America. This is my family. These are my mother's, father's, brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, and it gets hard. Yeah, I'm sorry, I gotta walk away. I'm about to have a moment.
Does anybody else have names that they want to talk about?
Everyone here agrees it's been a horrible year on the streets.
I'd like to share a story about a brother that I was staying in the tents around Thunderbird House. So for the last couple of weeks, I'd make him coffee. I brought him a cooler, like a thing from home, and he asked me if he had any medicine for him. I said, yeah. So he came into Thunderbird House with me, and I gave him cedar, sage, and when I gave him sweetgrass, he started crying. And then I gave him a smudge bowl, and he was having a really hard time. And he said to me, he looked at me, he goes, it's my time, it's time now. And I didn't know what that meant until yesterday. He was found deceased in an abandoned van in front of Salvation Army. So yesterday I sat and I had ceremony and I sang him the traveling song, and his name was Joe Turcotte.
This year has been the hardest that I can remember in terms of the amount of people we've lost in the communities. No. Between, the poverty and everything, and then the toxic drug crisis, we're seeing more death than we've ever seen. So
this list has 36 names on it. That is the highest that you can remember?
That I remember at this event, yeah, but it's definitely higher than that as well. We know we're not capturing everybody, right?
Right. Jamil Mahmood is the executive director of Main Street Project, the homeless shelter across the street from Hope Alley.
Don't be shy. If you want to say something about them, tell a story about these individuals that meant something to you, please feel free to do that.
Al Weeb was once homeless for 28 months. He says he was too proud to go to a shelter, so he lived in a derelict car.
I put up that little plaque up there that honors the people that have passed away. It's just so vital that we do this, just have people remember these people and other statistics.
The annual ceremony is difficult for those gathered here. Many are homeless themselves, or work in some of the shelters and agencies that help the homeless. They knew the people who died.
This is not the whole list. It's probably 3 times the size of this, if not 4 times. Absolutely. This is just, we got this list from the shelters, that's it. And we put up posters in shelters and asked them to put names down that people know, and this is where this list comes from. But there's probably roughly around 120, 30 to 150 people that have passed away this year because of fentanyl, and that's the big killer.
One of my good friends, Kathy Moose, passed away. She was always in my room helping me. She was a good person. I miss her. And I hope I'll be with her someday when it's time for me to go to heaven. And I just wish her have fun in heaven. That's it. That's what I got.
The logs are making a popping sound in the sacred fire as the free coffee and stew help people warm their hands before they leave to get on with their day. Al introduced the ceremony to Winnipeg in 2017 after attending one in London, Ontario. He says he takes the time to remember those who died because he survived.
Put myself down in the back of a 64 Mercedes. I used to drive a Mercedes, so why not a Mercedes, right? And so that's where I stayed for 14 and a half months. And I thoroughly expected to die of hypothermia within a day or two because it was minus 30, minus 40. Didn't happen. You know, I wake up with a blanket of snow on me like this much because the sunroof leaked at the front window. There's an open front window, and all the snow would come in and cover me up. And somehow I survived. Sure, I got frostbite on my nose, my fingers, my toes, and everything.
There's some stew, eh?
But
There's coffee and stew.
I wasn't supposed to be alive, but I was.
There you go.
The 2022 street census officially counted 1,250 people who said they were homeless in Winnipeg. But Jamil agrees the real number is much higher.
You know, we have something like 700 shelter beds in the city, and they're full almost every night. So, you know, and then that's only what we know. There's, you know, not counting people who are hidden homeless and couch surfing. I would say it's probably 3,000 to 5,000 people.
The census says hidden homelessness and couch surfing are the same thing. People staying temporarily with friends or family or even strangers because they have nowhere else to go. This includes people in hotels who don't have permanent homes. The census says researchers conservatively estimate that for every person experiencing absolute homelessness, another 3 are in hidden homelessness. If this ratio held true for Winnipeg, the census would have undercounted the hidden homeless population by at least 4,000 people.
It's precarious out there, right? There's so many variables, you know, so many, every day out there is traumatic, right? Every day can end, right? In a bad way. So yeah, I could have been on that list many times.
Al lost his job when he was 55 years old. He was making 6 figures selling advertising. He says he now applies his networking and sales abilities to improving the way homeless people are treated.
I have a distinct advantage over so many people in the sector. I've seen the world from here and not caring about homelessness or even giving it a second thought, right? And I can understand both areas. I understand why people don't want these folks in their areas or, you know, in their public parks and stuff like that. I understand that. But I also have that deep empathy for the folks here, right? And I know how easy it is to die on the streets. Right?
Back in Hope Alley, the sacred fire is embers now, and the coffee and stew are long gone. Jamil says to end homelessness, we need to understand it.
I just think, the solutions are here in the community, and we have them, and if the community is resourced properly and the work is led by people who are experiencing homelessness and who have lived it, then we can solve these problems. They're not unsolvable, but it takes a lot of political will and it takes investment, and until we get the investment in housing, we're not going to see a change in community.
That's an important point. Homeless shelters are supposed to be for emergencies, but they've become housing. Housing for people with mental health issues, housing for people with addictions, housing for people fleeing relationships, housing for people seeking safety, housing for people whose First Nation doesn't have enough housing, and housing for people who can't afford housing.
Shelters aren't solutions, they're band-aids, right? And we don't want to see another shelter pop up. We'd rather see 10 housing blocks pop up.
Again, it's right there in the street census of 2022. Winnipeg had fewer than 100 units for rent in the $750 price range across the whole city in 2021. Jamil says vulnerable people need housing with supports, also known as wraparound services.
Shelters are catch-all for everything, right? Like, we have folks in psychosis, we have folks using substances, right? So it's not a place where you can do a lot of work to help folks move forward in a good way because of the amount of people we see and the kind of level of crisis. So the whole sector kind of wants to see us move towards get the housing up, get people into housing, give them the supports they need, and then we can start changing how we do shelters and hopefully convert all the shelters into transitional housing down the road. They'll take some time, but that's the hope, right? And that's how we work. We want to work ourselves out of being a shelter and being a really good housing provider.
When Jacob Kaufman handed me that list with the names of 36 people who died while homeless this year, he whispered, "Do something about it." So I made this episode to mark in the World Book that they were here.
Oscar Sumner, Jonah Young, Catherine Moose, Conrad Petit, Arthur Lee, Natasha Gravlin, Fallon Johnson, Doug Bilecki, Lacey Kershin, Henry P., Nicole M., Michael G., Ashley Hager, Raymond Breland, Kelly Mubalajan, Morgan Harris, Greg Harris, Barry M., Derek Mundor, June Johnson, Doug Baylor, Paris Jr., Reggie Jamardi, Kendra, Raymond Breland, Austin Mowat, Bruce Ray, Henry Linklater, James Briere, Friday, Byron Murdoch, Ivan Clayton John Marsden, Trish Mack, Twyla Stevens, Carmen Peachy, and Dave Braun.
I'm Kathleen Martins. Goodbye for now. Our Relatives, written and reported by Kathleen Martins. Recorded and edited by Jesse Andrushko. Produced by Mark Blackburn. Original theme music by Backyard Rink. Cover art by Shania Murdoch and Alicia Dawn.
Hello, I'm Rick Harp, host of APTN News Brief, a daily podcast version of the nightly broadcast of APTN National News. Available on all major podcast platforms, APTN News Brief is your quick way to hear the headlines every weekday morning. Learn more at aptnnews.ca/podcasts.